Welcome to Norton Folgate. A liberty from 1547 to 1900, it became a place for the eccentric and creative to come outside of the city's jurisdiction. With iconic properties such as Dennis Sever's house, the Liberty has seen names from Marlowe to Madness seek inspiration here.
There's quite a good chance for both Dr. Faustus and Stuart Malta having been composed in Norton Folgate.
With everything from silk weavers to raves and perhaps even its own saint, the street definitely isn't short on anecdotes.
Saint Louisa of, I say Carluccio's, of Spitalfields, of Norton Folgate, that's the story.
Recently though, planning debates have taken centre stage, and after defeating British land in 1977, the Spitalfields Trust are once again trying to save Norton Folgate from plans they claim would remove 70% of the conservation site. With the Spital Square development behind, and the city coming ever closer, the plans follow a trend of local redevelopment. And with the large-scale development opposite Norton Folgate a principal place, due to be joined by 7 towers at the nearby Old Bishopsgate Goodyard site, the fall of Norton Folgate could see East London take on a whole new image. So, I've come to Norton Folgate to unmask its hidden personality and see its impact on arts and culture. My first appointment here is on Folgate Street with the creator of the charming Dennis Sever's house. David Milne has been involved with the house for over 25 years and has agreed to tell me about the area's history and also about the Save Norton Folgate campaign's alternative redevelopment ideas.
Norton Folgate is a district outside of the city walls, Bishopsgate, set up as a liberty. That became almost like its own independent council, which gave people the freedom from living outside of the confines within the city of London. The silk merchants moved here. These new houses were laid out for them on the site of the medieval priory that had been here since 1197, much of which is still below our feet. In the 1970s, Dennis came here, acquired this house, and lived in it pretty much in its original state. Very little electricity, no modern amenities, no central heating, anything like that. And then he decided to live in his house in this 18th and 19th century manner. At the same time, the Spitalfields Trust had formed themselves and had stopped British land destroying what survives of the 18th century district today. And here they are now, 40 years later, isn't it? Yeah, 40 years later, they've come back to finish their job. That covers the whole site on the opposite side, which in itself is conservation area, and the whole act of conservation area is to conserve and protect ancient buildings. They plan to demolish more than 70% of it, keep fragments of facades, and then from within those fragments build between, I think it is 10 and 13 stories of yet more office, more retail, which will blight and destroy this neighbourhood.
And so what are your plans, opposing British lands? What would you like to see done with the area that you're in?
Well, I think all the idea is that all of the remaining historic fabric should be remained, adapted, because the warehouse developments that they plan to demolish and remove forever, they've all been in constant use up until the last few years. So that you can work within them. And that idea of just removing it to get bigger floor space for more commercial use or for more banking use should not be happening within this ancient district. You know, this is a place where people have lived on and off now for the last 2,000 years. The 18th century streets will be blighted if there are great big glass office developments surrounding them, or as proposed here, landing right in the middle of them. So the idea is to restore 18th century houses which are threatened with demolition, restore 19th century houses and their original shop fronts, which can be lived and worked within. And that will save this neighbourhood. You know, it's a great neighbourhood. Hundreds and hundreds of people come here at the weekends, and we migrate to wonderful districts and neighbourhoods because we're human and this is our life. We don't spend our time endlessly wandering around huge corporate office developments.
So I've just come out from talking with David from Dennis Ever's house, and I've just come down Blossom Street, and I've just had a look at the leaflet he's given me. Now, I read before I came, obviously, that 70% of this conservation area would be taken out by the plans, but I'll just show you the picture here. And I think when you hear 70% and then when you see it, it's two very different things. I think 70%, so, it's 30% left, that's great. But when you look at what 70% of this conservation area would mean to take away just here on Blossom Street, and looking above and you can see the glass buildings coming over from the city, I think that's really going to change the character of the area, perhaps irreversibly. And I definitely think that it's quite interesting that conservation charities and the Historic England especially would agree with this, bearing in mind, as I say, 70% on paper definitely looks better than 70% when you come and have a look at it, because it's very shocking. Before I delve deeper into the history of Norton Folgate, I want to find out just how possible it is to restore the site. In 1995, St Leonard's Church in nearby Shoreditch was in desperate need of restoration, and it seemed destined for a modern makeover. But love, care and over £1.5 million saw the church restored to its former glory, a model that could be used in Norton Folgate. Its Reverend Paul Turp has agreed to show me around the church and explain the restoration process that was used here. Paul, take us back to kind of 1995. What kind of state was, I guess, the church in?
If you looked at it visually, you wouldn't see very much difference from in here, apart from the fact there were no galleries. The decor is what is left over from 1968. That's why it's very much a 1960s. Well, not nice. But the problem was that back in 1870, the Victorians, who are total vandals, decided to rip the galleries out and brick up the ground floor windows. And what they hadn't really sussed out was that the galleries tie physically the outside walls to these big rows of giant columns. So in the year 2000, we spent £1.165 million. We started with £89 in the bank, but we spent all that money and we rebuilt the galleries and we rebuilt a lot of other stuff in the building, and we retrieved the 18th century church.
So the kind of process of restoring everything here came to obviously a couple of million after everything had been included.
Yeah.
But you would definitely say, obviously, it was worth it here. Do you think a similar project, obviously the care and the love and attention that you've given this place, could work with the buildings in Norton Folgate?
Oh yeah, because they are terrific buildings. One of the reasons why this particular structure is important is built by George Dance the Elder. He was the favourite student of Christopher Wren. George helped build a cathedral, and he worked with Hawksmoor building other churches. And when the medieval church was going to fall down, and they said to George, build us a new church. What he did was extraordinary. Hint, word of advice, never ever give an architect a blank bit of paper, because they will do something which will shock you. And he did. See, if you walk into a Hawksmoor church, like the next church down the road, Christ Church in Spitalfields, you would walk in and you would feel physically small. It's the way the spacing is made, very, very carefully done. Architecturally, it is made to demonstrate this is your wrathful Father God's house, And you walk in here and you are a small non-thing. And a lot of dark spaces and gloomy, almost sort of quasi-Gothic. And what George did was none of that. He had 3 layers. The ceiling is 48 feet above the floor. He had 3 layers of clear glass. It dazzled, even in Windsor, it dazzled. And when you walk in here, you don't feel small. And the people freaked. It doesn't feel like a church, it's weird. The columns were so slender, they said it will fall down. So you have a church which is light, you fit into it, it's quite gentle, no bright, gaudy colours at you. And they gave it the worst insult they could think of in 1740. They said, it is feminine. It's the girly church. And they hated it and rejected it. And then very, very soon, people fell in love with it and started copying it right, left and centre all across England.
Wow.
And the whole idea behind it gets copied. The exact spacing and structure is not necessarily replicated, but the idea of it, that is what took off. So this is a very important bit of space, and it works. And for Norton Folgate, it will be exactly the same. It is human dimension. And people who are building giant office blocks and stuff like that don't understand the human dimension.
So I'm just back from seeing Reverend Paul Turp from St Leonard's Church in Shoreditch, and I think the overriding points, I think there's two main points. One, it's definitely possible to restore old buildings. What he's done there is amazing. I mean, the church was in a much worse state than what Norton Folgate is in. I mean, the gallery needed to be put in to stop the walls falling down. Nothing in Norton Folgate is crumbling. It just needs a bit of facial restoration and then the inside. So I think positivity, because it can clearly be done. The second point, which I think is again important, is that he had to raise a lot of money for that. And it's remarkable how Paul did it, and to have that kind of belief that you can do it is absolutely fantastic. I think doing a similar model in Norton Folgate will obviously cost a lot of money, as Paul's cost multiple millions to do. So I think a lot of how you do it possibly depends on if someone's willing to come forward with those plans for the millions to restore it. But I think it definitely proves that old buildings don't have to be restored and changed and regenerated into new buildings, because Paul could quite easily have given up his church and said, okay, we'll have a new space. But I think when people love heritage and buildings have that importance, as Paul was saying, with the Hawksmoor churches and how different his was with George Dancy Elder having been the architect, I think it's really important that, again, you can't see that, but the story's there. And I think that's similar with Norton Folgate. You can't see a lot of what the culture that, we're about to delve into from going into Norton Folgate, but if the buildings weren't there, you couldn't see it at all. And I think that's something that Paul really embraced, and that's something that St Leonard's really stands for. So I think that from that point of view, St Leonard's Church is definitely a very good base to base a good plan for Norton Folgate on, that would keep the buildings, at a cost, but it would keep the buildings and keep asking the questions and keep, drawing people into the neighbourhood. So it's definitely an interesting place to be in, moving forward and having a look at the culture of the area. Due to Norton Folgate falling outside the jurisdiction of the city, it became a place where creativity flourished, and many poets were attracted to the area because of this. Among the most famous was Renaissance playwright Christopher Marlowe, whose works include Dr. Faustus and the Jew of Malta. Arrest warrants show that he lived in the Liberty from around 1588 to sometime before his death in 1593. I've come to King's College London to meet Dr. Lucy Monroe, a lecturer in early modern drama studies and secretary of the American Marlowe Society, to find out how important Norton Folgate was to Marlowe's work.
There's quite a good chance for both Dr. Faustus and Jew of Malta having been composed in Norton Folgate. The best guess, dating of all of Marlowe's plays is difficult, or most of them is very difficult. But our best guesses at the moment are that Dr. Faustus was probably first performed in 1588, and the Jew of Malta a year later in 1589. We know that Marlowe was living in Norton Folgate in 1589 when he was described in one of these legal cases as being of Norton Folgate. And so the chances of them having been composed in that area are really pretty good. There's various theories, I think, for why Norton Folgate might have appealed to somebody like Marlowe. Proximity to the playhouses must definitely have been part of it, just for convenience sake. And you do tend to get communities of playwrights and also actors kind of around the playhouse in this area. The other thing about Norton Folgate is that at the time it's a suburban area. It's also quite mixed in terms of its environment. So there's a number of quite big houses, quite wealthy people living in the area, but also it's an area notorious for prostitution, for various other aspects of the entertainment industry, so gaming houses and things. But it's also an area where you can very easily get to more green spaces, so places like Moorfields, places like Finsbury Fields, where at the time you had archery practice going on and all sorts of kind of activities. But then it's also very close to the City of London itself, just outside the city gates. So it has that nicely kind of in-between kind of feel to it.
It was here on Worship Street that Christopher Marlowe made arguably his most infamous contribution to Norton Folgate.
Yeah, so this took place in September 1589, and what seems to have happened was that Marlowe was in a fight with a man called William Bradley, a young man of about 26 who was the son of a host at a local inn. And Marlowe and Bradley seem to have been fighting when Thomas Watson, who was another dramatist who was living in Norton Folgate, he'd been living in Norton Folgate since about 1587, he seems to have come across them. He claimed later, testifying to the coroner, that he'd drawn his sword to part Marlowe and Bradley, and that Marlowe stopped fighting at this point, but that Bradley turned to him and said something along the lines of, "Oh, art thou come? Now I will have a bout with thee." And actually using thou and thee is insulting at the time. It's the informal, aggressive way of addressing somebody rather than being polite and using you. The two of them got into a fight, and Watson claimed that he'd been backed up against a ditch and had been unable to escape, and so had stabbed Bradley in self-defence, and Bradley then died. Now, Watson and Marlowe did what technically they were required to do in a situation like this, and they stayed put until the authorities came, and then made their case to the authorities. They were both sent to Newgate for a period of time. Eventually the case came to court. Watson was actually cleared of murder by the coroner, but then it still had to go to the Old Bailey after that. He was cleared of murder, and Marlowe was cleared of being an accessory to murder.
But it wasn't just humans causing trouble in Norton Folgate. Fast forward 300 years, and it was animals causing chaos. Where the Savoy Cafe stands today on Worship Street was once the entrance to the East London Aquarium, Menagerie and Waxworks exhibition. Opened in 1875, the press said the aquarium was a small popular pleasure resort on Bishopsgate and contains, amongst other exhibits, a number of zoological specimens including bears, lions, jackals, birds and monkeys. For the admission price of just 1 penny, the exhibition also offered a celebrity waxwork collection, a show with tame lions 3 times a day, and a rifle gallery with a bird show. Finding itself in the daily press over thefts and cases of animal cruelty, it is the fire that occurred on the 8th of June 1884 that it is largely remembered for. The fire started in a waxworks exhibition and quickly ripped through the whole building, which extended from High Street Shoreditch to Blossom Street, having a frontage of 11 feet in High Street Shoreditch and 84 feet in Blossom Street. The press at the time captured the carnage inside the exhibition, with the downstairs faring better. Despite the fish perishing, the seal, the ducks, the jackal, the elk and 3 bears were saved. But upstairs the fire was so vicious it left the monkeys perish without a trace, whilst a wolf, a lion and her cub shared the same fate. So by now crowds have started to gather on this street, because the menagerie backed onto Blossom Street here. These units are where the menagerie was. Now the crowds were waiting, they were gathered, and you can imagine there was roaring, there was clouds going crazy. I mean, the fire was roaring inside, there were wild animals in the building sort of crying out to be saved. And all of a sudden the crowd too were amazed because a bear appears at the window. But the problem was that the bear is frothing at the mouth and he's bleeding because he's eaten the glass that's been blown out the windows and he's just laying dead on the windowsill. So someone from the crowd out here decides they're going to save the bear, and they do no more than jump up, hang onto the windowsill and remove all the glass from the windowsill that has been sort of blown there and save the bear. And he comes down to a hero's applause. But I just think if you look at the empty street today and the street behind me here, you just can't imagine what it would have been like to be down here with the chaos and the shouting and the excitement of the crowd, the roaring of the fire, the roaring of the animals. And I just think it's amazing the history of a building that on such a quiet street today once had such a vibrant past. Today, I'm here on Elder Street to meet Dan Cruikshank. Dan squatted here in 1977 when British Land first tried to demolish the area. He also founded the Spitalfields Trust that look after the area and is behind the campaign today to save Norton Folgate. So Dan, in 77, obviously you were in front of 5 and 7 here squatted. Can you just tell us a little bit about how it feels to kind of be back today with British Land sort of coming back again to...
Well, yes, it's strange, 40 years on. This was an amazing thing. I mean, at the time we squatted, not because we wanted homes, but it was a political squat to make a conversation happen. These two buildings were in the process of demolition, 1725 billion buildings, and we wanted to talk to the owners, British Land, to see if we could negotiate some way where we, the Spitalfields Trust and others, could save them, repair them, buy them. But it all came to nothing, so in the end we took direct action. I mean, to be in possession of a building actually does provoke a conversation more than what we ended up actually occupying British Land's office in Portman Square when the kind of screws were on. So it was amazing to be back. I remember standing here, 1977, looking at these two buildings. We were occupying this one. It was in better condition, number 7. It had no roof. Demolition men had been in and out. They were subject to dangerous structures notice. One of them was, and this building said it had been given. It seemed to me a hopeless case. We were up against a powerful adversary, British Land, and all we could hope to do, I suppose, was to lose this battle maybe with some honour, and in the process of losing, raise the issue and save the adjoining houses. So to be here now, and the buildings are still here and occupied and repaired beautifully as houses, it kind of teaches me, always reminds me that it is worth taking on impossible battles. That seemed impossible at the time, because who knows? Yeah. The way things will turn out.
And so I guess then you didn't foresee that I mean, we've obviously created the Spitalfields Trust to kind of look after the area, but did you ever think that British Land would sort of come back and have another attempt at trying to take it away from you again?
Well, one didn't think the development would stop here. One did think, I suppose, naively, in the early 1990s that an air of benign appreciation would descend upon Spitalfields. When these two houses were saved, we did manage to repair them well, as a model of how one treats a fragile 1720s panelled house. And it was a bit of a watershed. The other houses in the street came on the market. Some were bought by various people. I bought mine from the then owners, who I think were still British Land or Napier Properties, and so on, and then it kind of spread through the area. I mean, the other houses came on the market, people were interested, good repairs took place, families moved back in. So I suppose one thought, one thought at that time that the moment had come when Spitalfields was going to be saved, and when the houses would be lived in again by families of all sorts, as social housing around the corner, so private housing, and tourists started to come in, and Londoners started to come in and appreciate it as an historic area. So it did seem unlikely that one would see it once again, mass clearances proposed.
I guess also going back to sort of 1977, Sir John had a lot to do with the campaign, obviously saddened with us now. But do you think he would have been again with his poetry behind the campaign to come and save the area once more?
John Betchman turning up was tremendously useful, and his heart and soul was in it. I took him round the houses, these two, looking at them, and then walked down the street looking at the other houses, which were then not under direct threat, but they were empty mostly and rotting, and they would, I think, have been demolished or gutted in the proposals that were then around. Yeah, so Betjeman was amazing, and I can see absolutely no reason to think he wouldn't come back from the grave any moment now and totter down the street again with his glass of wine in hand.
Dan was also able to tell me about St. Louisa, whose story takes place where an Italian restaurant stands today on Spittal Square.
This wonderful woman called Donna Luisa Carvajal, a Spanish noblewoman, arrived in England in about 1605. She came here to save the souls of the benighted Protestants. We were doomed, the Protestants of here, to hellfire. She felt her mission was to save us, to save the English Protestants from certain doom. And she came here as a missionary to fulfill that purpose. But as a Spanish Roman Catholic, her life was in danger. You know, there was great persecution of Catholics. And however, she maintained her position within the protection of the Spanish ambassador's residence near the Barbican. But in about 1611, I think, thereabouts, she acquired the brick house, and she writes to her brother. Her letters survive, describing this brick house as this sort of building on the edge of London in somewhere called Spitalfields, lovely. And there she pursued her vocation. In secrecy, a house multi locked and bolted, and all this is explained in her letters. And one of the great things at that time, of course, the great fear here of Jesuits coming from Spain. To be a Catholic was tantamount to being treasonable. You could be in cahoots with the national enemy, the Spaniards, and you could be sending back, information. So it's a very dangerous game. And Jesuits who were coming to help convert and save the Protestant souls of this country would regularly be, arrested and put hardly to the question, because the Protestants wanted to get the Catholics to belittle themselves under torture. Terrible, terrible business. Many were executed. She became obsessed by collecting the body parts of the executed Jesuits, because the bones of a martyr were sacred. They would bring power and faith to a church. And so she would do this, collect these body parts and bring them back to the house on the corner, the brick house there. And they had a chapel on the first floor, all described. And the body parts, I say the body parts because the Catholics had been hung, drawn and quartered. So you would get literally body parts brought back, gently cleaned and wrapped in clean cloth and kept on the altar, and then secretly sent back to Spain. The altar being roughly where, I said before, the altar in her house being roughly where the dried meat counter now is in Carluccio's. As a strange the world wags. She herself died in London, not as a she wasn't executed, but she was. Eventually, the house was raided under the order of the Archbishop of Canterbury, a hardline Puritan. She was questioned, but well treated. She was too well connected at that time. There were also negotiations afoot between England and Spain over the marriage of the Prince of Wales at that time. However, but she did die. She died of a broken heart in 1613, and she herself was then recognised as a martyr. She hadn't been executed, but she had died for her faith, and her body was ultimately put in a box and sent back to Madrid, where it resides in a nunnery, a royal nunnery in Madrid, awaiting her long-promised sainthood. So she may yet become Saint Louisa of, I say Carluccio's, of Spitalfields, of Norton Folgate. That's the story.
Moving into the 21st century, Norton Folgate is still a place where creativity flourishes, with the music scene being drawn here. This was the case for Secret Sundays, whose brand of Sunday afternoon raving worked perfectly with the open nature of the beer garden at the Poet on Blossom Street. I met up with Secret Sundays founder and DJ, James Priestley, to reminisce about the parties they held in Norton Folgate. When you were playing in East London, one of the places you played was the Poet in Norton Folgate. And so what made that a good choice for Secret Sundays?
It was, location-wise, it was, as I said, we started at 93 Feet East, which is on Brick Lane, which is just not far from Norton Folgate. So when we had to move out of 93 Feet East, we were doing every week there, every Sunday, and there were some issues with basically neighbours and sound. same old story. And so quite abruptly we had to leave that venue. We had quite a few events already planned, and nowhere really to go. And it happened to be that one of the managers of 93 Feet East got a job at the Poet, and he kind of said, "Oh, you should come and take a look at this new pub." We were like, "Pub?" We were like, "Yeah, come and have a look, trust me." So we went down, and yeah, obviously has this incredible garden, beer garden really, that with quite high walls and quite secluded really, and a real nugget in the middle of the city of London. It's like, wow. So yeah, we just thought it could be great. We really like doing, it's a summer party as well, I should have said, so we only do parties really in the summer outside in London. So the idea of actually being able to do it properly outside, so in such a good location, central East London, was just like great. So yeah, we took it on.
And I guess having played at the Poet for sort of two or 3 years at that point, could you tell us about the evening when it kind of sort of, I guess, all went a little bit wrong for you, and the owner came back to find you in his garden?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the story goes, well, from what I remember, we had the opportunity for really quite a huge DJ to come and play for us. He was playing at the End nightclub the night before, and he'd expressed an interest. It was Luciano, who's now, I don't know, he's an absolutely huge DJ. There was a time when he's really coming through, and we had an opportunity. He wanted to play for us, which was a real privilege. But it fell on a weekend when Peter, the owner, was away. But we were like, we still, the space is going to be empty. We still would be great to do it somehow. So we were like, how can we work it out? And it kind of came about by the fact that I think it was the landowner's son who started frequenting our parties, came down. We sort of befriended him a bit. We somehow got in touch with him, and I think he kind of like helped allow us to use the garden of the pub. We didn't use the inside of the pub at all, so it was literally just, it's got separate gates. We got some extra toilets so we're completely self-sufficient there. But yeah, I think Peter was back in Ireland for the weekend. I think he caught wind of the fact that we were on it, doing our thing, and I think maybe through some residents, I think maybe he complained or got hold of him, and yeah, he came down sort of towards the end of the day, and yeah, put a pretty abrupt stop to what was going on. But I think he was alright with it in the end after a while. I think he kind of almost admired our balls and doing that, because he's quite a risk taker himself. So yeah, it was a funny one.
And I guess looking back on kind of your time in East London, how important would you say that was to kind of how Secret Sundays is now? Yeah,
I mean, that for me, in any interview I've always said that the Poet has been my favourite ever venue for Secret Sundays ever. They were some of the best ever parties we've ever done there. Just the intensity of the as I said, that the high walled kind of garden, being outside, this kind of in the middle of London, it was just really kind of, the whole mix of all those things is really quite random. And, I don't think you find that in London now, which is a real shame. And so yeah, it's hugely important. I think some of the best times ever playing at Secret Sundays were there. Some of the best parties we've ever done have been there, and yeah, it was killer.
So I guess my final question would be, obviously, if Peter would allow it and the residents didn't complain, would you definitely sort of go back and play one last show at the Poet?
Would we do another Secret Sundays party there? Yeah, yeah. If everyone was sort of up for it. I mean, I think after a while, like when we had to stop doing parties there because things weren't working out with the neighbours and stuff. Every now and again, when we were looking for a venue, we'd be like, should we call Peter? Should we give him a call and maybe see if he's maybe changed his mind? But I think he had to take his business in a bit of a different direction. They were becoming more food focused on a Sunday and just having a normal kind of bit more of a steady clientele, which for us coming to do a party on a one-off would have gone against the grain for him. So we knew it didn't really work for him. So yeah, we stopped calling him after a while. But yeah, I mean, it was great. Love to do something there again.
What has become clear from my time in Norton Folgate is the importance of keeping old buildings. It's not necessarily that those buildings still have memories today, or perhaps still even have a use today, but it's important that those buildings are still there to spark the memories that inspire. For instance, without the warehouses on Blossom Street, How would you ever know that there used to be a menagerie there unless you thought and you looked at it and you thought, wow, these old buildings are great. I wonder what was there before. And it's the exact same with places like Dennis Sever's house. They catch your eye from the outside and they make you wonder, and that is why Norton Folgate is such an important area of London, because you can't see its history. You know, you won't go there today and see Christopher Marlowe on the street. You won't go there today and see wild animals roaming around. You know, you might not even go there today and see a secret Sunday's rave. But the thing is that these things all happen there. And the importance of the buildings for sparking that thought of, oh, I wonder what happened in this area, is why I think from my research and my time here that Norton Folgate can't be developed, because a residential area or a corporate plaza doesn't spark that same thought in the mind. It doesn't get the imagination whirring and that quest to go and research like an old warehouse does, or an old Art Deco clock, or sash windows and things like that. So it's crucial for London's past that the buildings from London's past are kept, not because of the buildings per se, even though they are very beautiful, but because without those, the memories will be forgotten. I am a young executive, no cuffs than mine a cleaner. I have a slimline briefcase, and I use the firm's Cortina. In every roadside hostelry, from here to Burgess Hill, the matras de hotel all know me well, and let me sign the bill. You ask me what it is I do. Well, actually, you know, I'm partly a liaison man and partly PRO. Essentially, I integrate the current export drive, and basically I'm viable from 10 o'clock till 5. For vital off-the-record work, that's talking transport-wise, I've a Scarlet Aston Martin, and does she go? She flies. Pedestrians and dogs and cats, we mark them down for slaughter. I also own a speedboat, which has never touched the water. She's built of fiberglass, of course, I call her Mandy Jane, after a bird I used to know. No soda please, just plain. And how did I acquire her? Well, to tell you about that, and to put you in the picture, I must wear my other hat. I do some mild developing. The sort of place I need is a quiet country market town that's rather run to seed. A luncheon and a drink or two, a little savoir-faire. I fix the planning officer, the town clerk and the mayor. And if some preservationist attempts to interfere, a danger structure notice from the borough engineer will settle any buildings that are standing in our way. The modern style, sir, with respect, has really come to stay.